Okay. Hello, everybody. It is the post-market wrap-up, March 16th, and I just want to kind of go over a couple things. The Federal Reserve is meeting today and tomorrow. I don't think it really published too much just yet, and I think tomorrow is going to be the bigger day where they're going to, come out and mention a few things. Powell is going to say something to, make sure that people don't overreact to the potential inflationary fears that are showing up in the economy that haven't really come to fruition just yet in terms of showing up in all the numbers. There tends to be a lag. And so with all this additional stimulus, I do think it's inevitable that it's gonna flow into the markets. Wrap up here. Okay, so let's kind of go through some of this, folks. Let me see here. Just going to copy this one thing here, and thank you for your patience. One of these days, I'm going to get this squared away just right. Okay, so basically, let's talk about the Federal Reserve, because the Fed's meeting tomorrow, and there wasn't a whole lot of economic news that came out today. The Federal Reserve seems to be the big elephant in the room. I decided to kind of pull down the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve as of the recent print, so to speak. And basically, you could go to federalreserve.gov if you want to pull any of this data down and see for yourself that the current size of the Federal Reserve balance sheet is $7.579 trillion. Let me repeat that, $7.5 trillion. So last year, in the beginning of 2020, the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve was $4.1 trillion. So in a little over, I guess you can say 12 months, 14, 15 months, it's grown by $3.4 trillion. Now, what does that $3.4 trillion have in common with the national debt or the budget deficit? So would you believe that the budget deficit of the United States went up by approximately the same amount? So the government, the entire deficit of the government is being financed for the most part by the Federal Reserve. So the government is literally funding all of its operations through the Federal Reserve right now. So the Federal Reserve is giving money to our government that our government is agreeing to pay back, and they're letting them do this. So the bigger question we should ask ourselves is, why are our elected officials agreeing to be enslaved to the Federal Reserve? Who's calling the shots? Why are we agreeing to be on the hook for trillions of more dollars in just a single year? Now, I want you guys to think about something. I gave you the Federal Reserve balance sheet as of the beginning of 2020. Once again, you can go to federalreserve.gov. They have to list all this information. Assume I did a little typo. Maybe I added a zero, which I did not, but you could just assume I did and go look at it and see for yourself, so you'll be just as alarmed. The Federal Reserve balance sheet at the beginning of 2012 was $2.9 trillion. So between 2012 and the beginning of 2020, it went up by $1.3 trillion. So it went from 2.9 to 4.2, a little less than 4.2, in 8 years. And then last year, it jumped up by over 3.4 trillion in a single year. Now, I want you to imagine back to 2008, which might bring some really bad memories to some people if they lived through this time in the financial markets. But in 2008, right before 2008, so in July of 2007, and they only, on their website, They only show this data going back to 2007. The balance sheet of the Fed was $870 billion. And then by the end of 2012, it was $2.9 trillion. So during the entire financial crisis, all of that chaos, the markets imploding, AIG being nationalized, all these auto companies being nationalized, the Federal Reserve's balance sheet grew by just over $2 trillion. So during a 4-year period, during the worst depression, recession, you want to call it, up to, like besides the Great Depression, only $2 trillion of new debt was added. So you guys might all be thinking, Bobby, what the hell are you talking about? Who cares? Why? How does the Fed's balance sheet impact me? Okay, I'm just trying to go about my life. I don't know what the Fed balance sheet means. You're throwing these numbers around, 870 billion, then it went to 3 trillion. Now it's at 7.5 trillion. So he added $7 trillion in basically a little over 13 years. What does this mean to the average person? Well, the Federal Reserve is not owned by the federal government. Okay, so that's number one. So everybody who thinks the Federal Reserve is owned by the federal government because it has the word federal is mistaken. It has nothing to do with the Federal Reserve being owned by the federal government. The Federal Reserve is a private institution that has to follow the laws that Congress passes that allow it to have a monopoly on the printing of money. Okay? So there's 13 branches of the Federal Reserve. There's 13 locations. Think of it as like, 13 families, maybe. I don't know. I'm just saying. Maybe it's a weird coincidence. I have no idea. But all I'm telling you is that Chicago, San Francisco, New York, all the major cities in this country have a Federal Reserve location. Okay? So these branches of the Federal Reserve, up until last year, I believe Trump gave another institution the right to print money or to issue credit in the economy, which started to break up the Federal Reserve monopoly. But that's a whole nother conversation. That's super complicated. I just want to stick with the Federal Reserve right now. This organization, this entity, has the ability to add money into the system and to remove money from the system. And it does so with two mandates. There's two things that the federal government has agreed to allow the Federal Reserve to exist if it maintains two mandates. One is price stability. So making sure that the price of things does not collapse or fall significantly. I'll explain why in a second. And the second mandate is full employment. They try to balance things that people are always working. Okay? Now, as you can imagine, these things sometimes run counter to each other. It's hard sometimes to have price stability and full employment. Don't believe me? Ask this guy named Jimmy, the peanut farmer, Carter. So Jimmy Carter had the worst of both. He had horrible price stability and horrible job opportunities. And he's the one that coined the phrase misery index, if you recall. So for any of you that have studied history or possibly lived through this period in the 70s when the peanut farmer from Georgia, I wonder if there was a lot of corruption back then as well. Maybe there was. I don't know. It'd be interesting to look at the data. Maybe it started a lot sooner than we thought. Well, anyways, this peanut farmer, Jimmy, gets in there, and he doesn't know what the hell he's doing. Sound familiar, folks? And then all of a sudden, inflation takes off, and then the unemployment rate shoots through the roof. And he coined this phrase, the misery index, when he was running for president in 76. And little did he know that it would come back to haunt him, because his misery index was off the charts. When you added the unemployment rate and the interest rate together, you had a misery index that was just absolutely pathetic. And if any of you also recall Reagan's slogan, a recession is when your neighbor loses his job. A depression is when you lose yours, and a recovery will be when Jimmy Carter loses his. And so that was one of the most brilliant campaign ads because it really summed up what Carter had done to this economy. Now, right now, where am I going with this? This inflation talk of Jimmy and what the Federal Reserve has done in the past and where we are right now. Well, if all this money, well, you ask yourself a question, Bobby, why did the Federal Reserve take on all this debt? So the reason the Federal Reserve took on this debt is because it had to issue money, cash, and printed money, and it gave it to our federal government. So our federal government wanted this cash so that it could pay its bills. So in exchange for this cash, the federal government gave the Federal Reserve a bunch of bonds, these notes. So now the Federal Reserve has notes. So they have these bonds that they have to go to the federal government at some point, depending on the maturity of the bonds, and say, we want our money back. Go get it for us. And hence, this number has shot up by $3.4 trillion in 1 year. Now, I want you to think about that number because what happened before 2020? There was a tremendous amount of progress being made by what the average American worker was making under the 3 years of Trump prior to this virus. So as a result of Trump's progress, in which he cut regulation, he cut taxes, the wage gains were off the charts relative to what they were the previous 16 years combined. We had more real wage gains across the entire U.S. economy in 3 years than in the previous 16 years combined. Let me say that again. 16 years of wage gains under Barry and Bush, or Bush-Barry, whatever you want to call it, Benedict Barry and Bush, Bushwhacker Bush and Benedict Barry. Between those two jokers, 16 years, the average American worker had less in real wage gains than 3 years of President Trump. Now, who loses if that happens? Who lost in that equation? Well, the people that own the mega corporations, the globalists, the global corporations. So they weren't too fond of this. So it stands to reason who benefited the most from this virus. Global corporations did. Don't believe me? Pull up their stocks. Look at how they've done. Look at the middle and the small and mid-sized businesses across this country. Go look at how they have done. So what do you do to make sure that wage pressure and wage gains disappear? Throw 10 million people out of work. Actually, the number was close to 20 million at the height of this whole crisis. 20 million Americans lost their jobs. Right now, the number is probably 9 million, still below where it was. But if you throw out a bunch of people out of work, maybe they won't ask for raises as much. Maybe they'll be thankful they have a job. Sound familiar? Oh, and by the way, they can't go work in a private small company because we're going to shut those down with these ridiculous mandates. And then they're going to have to come grovel to us. So the Federal Reserve, folks, if you think it's owned and does things on behalf of global corporations, you might be right. So I'm letting you put the pieces together, folks. Look into it. I don't feel like getting banned. All I'm saying is, who won? Who won as a result of last year's policies? Who benefited the most? All I know is the bankers of the Federal Reserve, the families that own the Federal Reserve, their bond portfolio, what the American people owe the Federal Reserve has gone from 900 billion, less than 900 billion, to almost 8 trillion in 13 years. We owe them $7 trillion more dollars than we did 13 years ago. Now, if you don't think something's wrong, then I do think you need to go back to school and go through some basic math. There is a serious problem because each $1 trillion is 1 million millions in a trillion. So $7 trillion is 7 million millions. Now, I want you to think about this for a second. The average American family until recently had a net worth of about $100,000. So, over the past 13 years, the debt of this country has gone up by 70 million people, 70 million families worth of net worth is how much the debt of this country went up in 13 years. So when I call for a debt jubilee, this is why I think we need to have one. I think we, the people, should say, you know what? I don't know what scam you are running. I don't need to understand the whole damn scam. But I will tell you one thing. You've been scamming us. And since you've been scamming us, we want to go audit every single dollar from the past 30, 40 years and make sure that we owe you what you think we owe you and what you're saying we owe you. And guess what? There's this beautiful thing called bankruptcy. Every once in a while, some people, they get in over their skis, and they need to file bankruptcy, and they get to start over, and they wipe the slate clean, and they turn around and create a new life after learning from their mistakes. And one of the things that something that isn't understood by a lot of Americans about bankruptcy. Bankruptcy is vilified. A lot of people vilify bankruptcy. And I understand, if it's done with malicious intent, bankruptcy is a bad thing. However, one of the reasons why the United States has been so much more successful than Europe, okay? I'm going to say that again. Why has the U.S. been so much more successful than Europe over the past 100 plus years? And it comes down to when people make a mistake and they take a risk, they build a business, they try to do something, they try to create something, and it doesn't work out. So people invested in it, they gave it a shot, they bet on it, people wasted, they spent their life trying to build something, or maybe they spent a few years trying to build it, and they rolled the dice, it didn't pay out. They are not shackled with debt the rest of their life. They can file bankruptcy, and they can say, you know what, son of a bitch, this didn't work out, I'm going to go try something else. And that entrepreneurial spirit, that we can do this attitude, because we know that the system can absorb losses. It can absorb mistakes. When people gamble to try to solve a problem, try to create something that's new, and if it doesn't work, they get to wipe the slate clean. That's one of the things that makes America such a great country. And this is one of the reasons why historically the United States has dominated planet Earth, is because before we started to taint our population with freeloaders, yes, I did say that, folks, politically incorrect. When we started letting freeloaders into this system, people that weren't really risk takers, they were people that wanted a handout. They wanted some kind of they feel they were owed something. I'm talking about the people that came to this country, like my parents, first generation, sixth grade, first generation, they immigrated here, sixth grade education. That's it. They didn't even speak the language, but they didn't want a handout. They never went on public aid. You know what they wanted? They wanted a chance to work. That was it. They wanted a chance to work and worship their God, and not be bothered and their all their data, or not their data, their wealth stolen from them. And what I'm saying is, we had an intrinsic entrepreneurial class formed by immigrants from all over this planet that were risk takers. They took a shot. My dad was 49 years old. I want you to think about this for a second. My dad is 49 years old, does not speak English, came here and worked as a cement finisher, which is hard work, made enough money so he can afford to bring his family over, and then worked as a cement finisher for another 30 years and worked every weekend to make extra money to make sure we were all fed. And that's a hell of a risk to take. Like I can't imagine I speak English right now, but if I just got up and just went to a country where I don't speak the language and said, give me whatever job nobody wants, and I will gladly take that job so that I can try to bring my family over there. And, this country is built by a bunch of people that have done this through the past 200 years. People that came from Ireland, people that came from Britain, people that came from, Japan and China and, Mexico, all these different countries where people just flooded here and they just wanted a shot. And they didn't want a handout. And, where am I going with this whole thing? Well, right now, this whole structure with what we owe the Fed, we don't see what the hell we owe them the money for. We got $1,400. I told you, the average person that works, if they get $1,400, they get some money for their family. But the government took on $12,666 per worker in this latest COVID bill. Where did the other 70% of the money go, folks? Why in the world did we give $50 to $150 billion of that money to people that aren't even here legally? They broke the law, and yet they're getting $50 to $150 billion of our money. Because if you broke the law, what do you think the odds are that you actually pay your fair share of taxes? I don't think it's too high. You might as well just keep breaking the laws. If you broke the law to get in here, you're going to keep breaking the laws to stay here as well. And so this money that's being owed and it continues to accrue is extremely disturbing. I know it's not the easiest topic, but if you have the time, try to go to federalreserve.gov. Try to read some of the reports. I know I'm trying to cover a lot of information from a lot of different angles. And sometimes, I'm not going to kid you, it takes a little bit of effort on my part to keep my head straight as to what I'm explaining, what each thing that I explain to folks. I will be building a website. I will be creating kind of like a puzzle. Like I'm gonna organize all these talks and the data from the talks in like the puzzle format. So it's like, here's how this piece goes and this piece goes. And I'm going to try to thread it together so that if you just pick up one of these talks and you're like, what the hell is he talking about with this one? Maybe I'll thread it to something else and just explain to people, if you don't know what this means, go here. If you don't know what this means, go there. And I'm going to try to make it as easy as possible for people to start to decipher it. And hopefully, as you guys do this, whoever's listening to this, and hopefully you guys find it valuable. Otherwise, I guess you wouldn't, don't waste your time. I'm not getting any ad money. So anyways, I turned the ads off. I don't want any ads on my stuff here. So at some point, I will be putting all these videos on Rumble because I'm a little concerned that YouTube might ban me. So I'm at Bobby Piton at Rumble. I don't have any videos there yet. I'm Bobby Piton at Gab. I'm Bobby Piton at Parler. And so forth. So just always remember Bobby Piton, and make sure that I said that it's me, because there's been some people creating fake accounts about me, which I think is pretty funny. But I never thought somebody making a fake account about this stuff. But so all I'm saying is, please look into it. You need to understand it, because when you work and you make money, your money is a store of your energy. Like, so if you don't spend what you made because you worked an hour. So for example, if you work an hour and you're the average American, you make about $30 if you make 60 grand a year. So if you make $30, in order to earn that 30, you have to create $75 of value. Okay, so you have to create $75 of value to earn 30. So it's about $1.25 a minute, thereabouts, right? Yeah, that sounds about right. $1.25 a minute. You have to create something, make people's lives better off through a service, through a product, something. Okay, so from that $1.25 you make per minute for a business, you get to keep approximately, 40% of that, right? So 40% of $1.25 is like 50 cents. So you make 50 cents a minute. Business collects $1.25. It has to cover expenses. Okay. So if you're making that much money and then you set aside a certain number of dollars that you don't spend for future consumption, you want to eat later in the future, maybe, and not have to work to eat. You want to put money aside for your kids' college. You want to put money aside for a vacation. You want to know that what you didn't spend, it keeps the value of what it was worth when you worked to make it. Let me say that again. You want the money that you didn't spend to maintain the value that it was worth when you made it. So if all of a sudden you made 50 cents per minute, you made 50 cents per minute that you worked, and the government put in a bunch of money and it diluted you to where you needed 60 cents of money to purchase 1 minute of goods and services that were the same when you earned your 50 cents, you should be angry because they just stole 1/6 of your money. They stole 20% of it. Because you went from 50 cents to 60, which is a dime. So one dime divided by 50 cents is 20%. So they stole 20% of all your past hours worked. So if you don't want to, if you don't want this to happen repeatedly, and you don't want to be stuck in this cycle that we all seem to be stuck in as a society, we need to all get far more educated, learn this stuff, try to understand this stuff. It doesn't have to happen overnight, folks. And along the way, I'll be explaining stuff. Hopefully, you'll talk to other people that understand this stuff. You'll come back with questions. I'll hopefully answer some of those questions. You'll have other people answer questions. You'll research the stuff. But between, we just need, I hate to say it, we only need we only need like 300,000 Americans out of 300 million. So about 300,000 Americans to really get their shit together. If they really understand this stuff, we can do away with a lot of this corruption by mobilizing the rest of the country. So it's kind of like, let's get to that 300,000 number, build a citizen army, so to speak. It's like I call it a constitutional militia. We build like a group of Americans that wants to be active in citizenship, understand what the heck is going around them, and then put together a game plan to restore our constitutional and God-given rights. And we don't want to try to hold dominion over others. We just want what's fair for us and our families, and we want to protect and defend others that don't understand what needs to be done. And hopefully, if enough of us do this, we will be able to truly take this country back. And then, as we do that and we build up these resources, we will be able to solve this. Somebody just asked a question. We have big challenges accessing each other in open communication. What do you suggest as solutions? It's funny you should say that, JJ, because I'm working on creating something using an open platform software. First off, is for the voter stuff. Now I hired somebody recently, and I'll be hiring a couple more people for my core business to help me with things for what I do for a living, this preactive stuff that I kind of talk about. Like, here's my little banner, preactive. this is what pays my bills. But what I'm doing is I'm trying to create a way for people to be able to communicate without censorship. And I haven't explained how I'm going to do that to the world for obvious reasons. I don't want people that are moles or people that don't want to see this happen try to shut it down. But I will tell you that I've made a tremendous amount of progress, and I know it's slow. It feels slow, but it's going at a very fast pace. I'm really curious to see what Lindell does, and so forth, and other people that are coming out with alternative medias. But the media that I'm trying to create, and it's a little unconventional, folks. My goal is to kind of create a structure or a network based around voter integrity at first, where Bobby Piton doesn't own it. I mean, I may own it at first and control it, but the goal is to create a structure where we, the people of the United States, own it. Not the stockholders, not all these other people that they're digging their tooth, they're digging their teeth in and claws in to try to rip us off. I'm talking about trying to construct something that is sound and that can't be corrupted. And it's not an easy task, but that every single person that's using it owns a piece of it that is not it's only diluted by other Americans that come into it, so to speak. Your shares and what you own of this overall structure that I'm creating is equal to your share of the American system with your right to vote. So nobody who doesn't have a right to vote will be able to own any of it. It will only be people that own a piece of it are confirmed real Americans. I'm thinking through how to verify who's a real American and not, and how this structure would be set up so that then when we communicate as free speaking Americans that believe in the Constitution and so forth, this would be a methodology in structure that I think could possibly work. And I don't have any desire. I think this, obviously, if I pull this off, I don't need to explain to you. It could be worth billions of dollars, and it'd be wonderful if that billions of dollars, if not more, was owned by the American people. I said this in December. I'll say it again before my computer dies because I didn't plug it in. I said some people look to see how much they can create for themselves over their lifetime. My big goal over my remaining lifetime is to create over $1 trillion of value where I don't have any of it. It's the public's. And that would be super cool for me. Like, I helped create $1 trillion of value, and it was dispersed among all the American people. That's a heck of a rush for me to do that. That's my goal. And I have enough crazy ideas to do it. I have ideas on how to cut healthcare costs and just prescription drugs by 30 to 50%. The reason why I haven't made it public yet is I want to be sure that whatever I do, that when I do create it, that the patents will be set up in a trust on behalf of the American people. That some shyster doesn't try to sneak in there if something happens to me and try to figure out how to rip it off for some corporation or some other little megalomaniacs. So until I can be assured that my ideas are properly protected and this thing is set up the right way, I am not. I'm not going to unleash some of my ideas onto the world. But when I do, I want it to be very clear that which ideas that I create and unleash are not owned by me. I want them owned by the American people, and that's just the way it is. And if other nations around the world want to use it, the American people will decide if they want to license it out, not Bobby Piton. So even if I create it, my mandate is American people first and America first. I'm an American. And then if it turns into something more, that's going to be up to the people to decide that will own whatever it is that I create. and or at least attempt to create with everybody else. Because at first it might be my idea, but then there's going to be other people that are going to throw in their ideas and make something far greater than anything that I can ever create on my own. And so that's the goal, folks. So with that, my battery's about dead. You guys have a wonderful evening. And American Public Trust, that's right. It's a trust on behalf of the American public. I'll see you guys at 8:30. I think I'm on day number 24 of my 365-day journey through the Bible in 1 year. So if you guys want to listen in, feel free to come back. I combine politics with the Bible. I'm trying to make it interesting, folks. So anyways, you guys have a wonderful day or wonderful evening, and I'm looking forward to seeing you soon. Thank you for chiming in. Thanks. Good night.